Welcome to another episode of the Student Spotlight series, where we showcase some of the work our past students have done. Today, it is our pleasure to have with us Kaushik. So, can you tell us a little bit about yourself, where you're from, what year of school you're in, and what course you took with CCIR?
Hi, I'm Kaushik. I am a current senior at Novi High School in Novi, Michigan. It is a suburb of Detroit located in the United States. I did the one-on-one research program with CCIR. I got the pleasure and opportunity to work with Dr. Hande Gusel. My research mainly concerned um, education and its relationship to how that impacts a student's ability to start a tech business. And I had a really good time with it. And I think it really taught me a lot about myself, but also grew my writing skills and then my research skills as well.
So, how did you become interested in the program?
So I really wanted to do research. It was something I've always wanted to do. I've always been curious about education, especially because I am a student. I've also really been interested in business as a whole. I've had a lot of experience working with it in a competition setting, and I've also done a lot of stuff with my high school robotics team. Um, so I really wanted to do research with it, and then I came across the CCIR website actually on social media, and I thought it'd be a really good idea to apply for. Um, yeah, so I just decided to go for it, and regardless of the outcome, it is what it is, and I got it, and I was very happy, and I did it, and I'm very proud and happy of the results.
That's great. Yeah, I mean, it already sounds like it was it was a positive experience.
Yeah.
So, regarding your topic, you mentioned that you're very interested in, I guess, in business from sort of like a competition perspective. Like it's something that you
Yeah.
already had a strong interest in coming in. I guess how much of the topic that you ended up researching was something that you sort of came in wanting to study, and how much of that was shaped by sort of your work with your mentor?
Yeah. So I've had a, some experience working with business in specific, and then also education because I've had a lot of experience mentoring people with different nonprofits, and I've also done a lot of tutoring. So I've had a lot of experience with education, and then I also had a lot of experience with business. On my high school robotics team, I actually was the sponsor relations group lead. So I helped to network with different companies across the country. I raised around, I think it was $250,000 in my time right now. I'm a senior, so about 4 years. So I've had experience with both topics by themselves, and I really liked both by themselves. Something I really want to study in college as well. Um, and what I think the CSIR program really did for me, and the best thing I really liked about it, was it really taught me the intersection between the two, and a lot about how interdisciplinary study really works. I didn't know much about that. I knew a lot of like colleges, universities, and research of that existed, but I didn't really know, especially how business and education can be intersected. So I think that's the biggest thing it taught me, and it is something I really want to learn more about in the future as well. So yeah.
So how was the project structured? How did you sort of develop a methodology with your mentor and sort of create a kind of plan of work? And then how did you execute that?
Yeah. So the first few weeks, we mainly just spent trying to do some more research about like education because that was kind of like the base of my study, especially because it kind of dealt with like pretty much all aspects of my study were related to education. So the first few weeks was just me trying to learn more about it, especially because outside of my settings doing extracurriculars, I didn't really know that much about it. And I think it was a really good experience to learn about it. I'd read a lot of research studies about it. I learned a lot about the different inequities and the sociology aspects of the topic. And then after that, I think that was around 6 weeks into the 14-week program. And then after that, we mainly spent figuring out in the 8 weeks left what was the best way to approach my topic. I presented three different methodologies. Um, Two different methodologies, two which were primary and then one which was secondary. I think one of the really good things about my the program in specific is that the mentors do a really good job of like adapting to your needs in specific, because I was also someone who was really busy outside the program, and what my mentor, she did a really good job of helping me and guiding me through there. And I think that's where I landed doing my secondary methodology and sourcing, where I mainly collected different research studies and tried to interpret their data to give new findings. And that's kind of what I did. I really liked it because it was more flexible and easy to balance. So yeah.
What do you feel like the sort of new insight or key finding that you, I guess, what was the key? What were the key insights that you sort of had at the end of the research process?
In terms of like my topic, or can it be like about like anything?
And I guess I was thinking in terms of your topic, as in like, how did you kind of contribute to or extend the literature that you had reviewed?
Yeah,
I mean, if there's anything else you have in mind, that's fine too.
yeah. Well, there's two main things. One is about the topic as a whole, and the second thing is just something I myself have learned. So as for the topic as a whole, I think the biggest thing that we've seen is that there is a trend specifically within bachelor's and master's education of students who end up going and starting a tech startup, which I thought was something really cool. I knew previous research had been done on startups as a whole. Tech startups was something that a few research studies have done, so we were still able to get that secondary data, but it was also a relatively new and not very nuanced topic that we not very much nuanced research was done. So I think that was also a big benefactor in terms of why I was able to do secondary research as well. Um, yeah, so that's the main takeaway from my research. I personally think the one more personality thing the program has taught me is that it's okay to like do not be a perfect all the time. I have a very big perfectionist, um, and especially in the program, like especially with the writing, because your mentor does help you with the writing a lot. There have been times where it's not the best, but I think the really cool thing is that it teaches you a lot about how to improve your writing, and it really just gives you a lot of that perseverance skill as well, and helps you shape it as a whole.
You mentioned that in your research, you were distinguishing between startups and tech startups. And I wonder if you could say
Yeah,
more about what you feel like makes those sort of distinct, and I guess why that's a category that needs to be researched or understood separately.
yeah. So I mainly focus on tech startups because of two main things. So from my personal experiences, I've had a lot of, I've worked with a lot of tech startups. I talked about in my robotics team, I worked in sponsorship. I've worked with a lot of tech startups for sponsorship. So I had that like sort of background information, and that I thought that was kind of interesting to me just because I've worked with them. And then the more like academic, like research reason was because it's something that really hasn't been studied that much. Startups in general has like just more general, like covering several different industries, but not many studies have focused on that industry in specific. So it was a really good way to analyze the studies that have for secondary research, but also provide new insights into the literary world as to um, tech startups in specific.
So I guess what are some unique aspects or things about tech startups as opposed to startups in general, maybe that you discovered during your research?
Yeah. So from what I've seen, their tech startups and actual startups as a whole, what we've seen is that the results tend to be somewhat similar. We do see that bachelor's and master's education do have a large impact on tech startup success. However, what we've also seen is that there are specifically for tech startups, there are a lot of experiences that you can get outside of an educational environment that can help you more. For example, a lot of universities, they don't teach you how to code or do these like skills that are do these skills and teach you them very much in depth. And some studies have actually shown that doing them outside of an educational study may be able to help you more. I thought that was really cool because it kind of contradicted a lot of what I thought previously. So I think that was definitely one of the most unique things that I found in my research.
So if I'm understanding correctly, you're saying that you found that, I guess that receiving a bachelor's or a master's or some kind of degree doesn't have as strong of a correlation to success in starting a tech business as you initially expected, or am I misunderstanding?
No, so what I was trying to say was that a bachelor's and master's degree does have an impact on your tech startup degree, but just one unique thing I found was that um, a lot of times those code specific skills, especially for tech, sometimes learning them outside of an educational setting could be helpful as well, and teach you sometimes more about especially the soft skills and the tech skills like collaboration, teamwork, things like that.
Okay, cool. I understand better, I think.
Yeah.
So then, do you feel like there are, like, on the basis of the research that you've done, you have thoughts on how maybe, uh, I guess, the way that bachelor's and master's programs are currently set up, how they might, be changed to better prepare people for success as entrepreneurs? Or do you feel like this is not about, you're not really interested in changing the way that education works now, and you're more just interested in advising the individual, who wants to start a business?
Even though my research wasn't really concerned too much about it, I think that if you find something that does need to be changed, I feel like you should do it. It's great to just better the environment as a whole if we recognize an inequality and need to change that. So I think one thing that especially a lot of educational systems could do better is including more like collaborative projects and experiments that help students actually gain those soft skills, because as I said before, from what we've seen, many studies show that students a lot of times don't receive the proper ability to gain these soft skills. And a lot of the times that is a reason that they're not able to sometimes start these tech startups or startups in general even. So I think doing more collaborative work would be very much helpful.
I guess, how do you situate that conclusion in the research that you did prior to writing your paper? I guess, what do you feel like was the new insight, or the sort of what was the new contribution that you made to the body of research that already exists on the topic?
I think the biggest contribution we made is we were able to actually synthesize and then streamline previous research that's been done into one research paper. Namely, being that we were able to show how um, educational systems do have a strong impact with tech startups. However, it's not always the end all be all. They're always like doing things outside of an educational system also does have an impact on your ability to start a tech startup.
So, okay. Yeah, that's really helpful. I'm curious because you mentioned a few times inequities, right? And I guess I
Yeah.
wanted to understand a bit more about what you had in mind. What kinds of inequities did you encounter when you were doing your research, and did you address them in your paper, or if so, how?
Yeah. So like I said before, I believe it was around 6 weeks, we spent time reading a lot of research studies on educational inequity. And there were we kind of tackled a lot of different inequities to learn more about this. During my research in specific, I learned a lot about gender inequity, especially because a lot of times I think I even remember a study that specifically stated that tech startups, more male tech startup entrepreneurs were being able to get more resources than female tech startup entrepreneurs, which is a large inequity. So I think I learned, especially in my research, I learned more about gender inequity, But throughout the program, I was able to we learned about able-bodiedness and the difference between able-bodied people and um, the opposite. And then we learned a lot about ageism and things like that and how they're able to be impacted, not only in the setting of tech startups, but also in education as a whole. So, yeah.
Did you have any thoughts on how those kinds of inequities should be addressed or could be addressed?
Yeah, I think making more programs to help people of minority and people of diverse backgrounds to make them feel more included and make them feel like they belong is definitely something that needs to be addressed and something that needs to be done. Um, Especially when I read a lot of these studies, there are a lot of times where many people in these minority backgrounds were not able to feel included and not able to feel like they had a voice, especially when it came, like I remember reading a lot about gender equity in this context. And I feel like making those programs and making more awareness of these issues is definitely something that needs to be done. I know gender inequity is something that's often talked about and is very important and very much should be talked about a lot. But I think something that more surprised me so, especially because I'm from sort of a small town, so I don't really I haven't seen this that much, was especially like ageism is something that's not really talked about much. And specifically for me, I'm fortunate enough to be in a community where many youth are of the same ethnicity as me. Most of the people at my school are South Asian. So, fortunately for me, I've not experienced many racial bias, but I think my eyes were definitely more open when I learned more about racial bias. I definitely was very much aware of it, but I was very fortunate to grow up in this community. And I think more like awareness for people who are in communities like this but aren't aware of the issues need to be created.
Yeah, I think that's definitely true. And this is kind of a broader question that I think probably transcends any particular research.
Yeah,
But we're talking about education, so I feel like it's worth bringing up. Do you
yeah,
have any thoughts just more broadly about what the purpose of education is? Why, how should schools conceive of their role in society or what they are
yeah,
trying to provide for their students?
yeah. That's actually something I think it's a very good question. Mainly because when doing this research, it made me think a lot about why even have education, not as like a student who has to like wake up at 7 a.m. every morning and it's like, why do I have to go to school? But in the context of when reading about all these inequities and how prevalent they are, why even have education? And I think the biggest reason and the biggest conclusion I came to is instead of telling students what to think, I believe education should be existing to teach students to think and to teach students to think what is morally right and to know about and to make them aware of real world issues. Because um, making them aware of these things and teaching them how to think can make them make them more aware of different problems in the world. And I think that's one of the greatest things.
That's really interesting because I mean, this is certainly reductive, but I think you could say
Yeah,
broadly maybe that there are two like paradigms of education, right? You have one conception of education that is sort of purely technical. Education is supposed to teach you technical skills that you can apply to, let's say your career or whatever else. And then there's a more holistic idea of education that sees education as having a kind of component of social responsibility or morality. Like education isn't just education about skills; it's the education of the whole person. And I find it interesting that it seems like maybe you incline towards the latter one, that you feel that education should have a moral component. I think uh, that's a less popular view these days, maybe.
well, I do believe that education should teach students various skills and help them prepare them for future careers. But I think more important than being prepared for future careers and learning all these skills is being a good human being. Um, so I do think schools should start teaching students how to think and how to be ethically and how to be ethical and how to be moral. I think that is very important. I think that is one of the most important things as a human being. So, and what better age to learn it than when you're young?
Yeah, I mean, for what it's worth, I completely agree with you. Though I mean, I think it brings up maybe difficult questions because everyone knows what it means to be able to code or to do scientific research, maybe. But it's hard. It's much to say what a good person is or what an ethical person is much more controversial. So when we conceive of education as being oriented towards some idea of morality or responsibility, we have to start to discuss sort of collectively what we think an ethical person is or what we think responsibility means, which is difficult. And I also think that's especially relevant when it comes to tech and tech startups, because you have all these companies that are really radically changing the way that we live. And I think that we certainly don't talk enough about whether these types of radical changes are desirable or responsible. I think there's an attitude often of just doing things because we can do them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I think one thing that people need to consider more, I 100% agree with the fact when you said people just think about when people make decisions, they just think, because I can do it. But I think there's more to just because I can do it. I think when you're doing something, especially when it's going to impact others, and regardless of how you think it might, even if it has some indirect consequences that you might not know, I think that's where school also needs to come in when teaching students how to think more also indirectly in terms of moral and decisions and ethical decisions instead of just thinking just more straightforward. Because especially nowadays, it's more, even if someone is trying to be moral, there's so many ways and to that people can indirectly just make a decision that can indirectly hurt someone else. And I think it's important that schools be able to teach people about this and make it more aware as well.
So this is, I think, an impossible question to answer.
Yeah.
But I mean, so after this, I'll try to steer back more towards CCIR. But
Yeah.
just for like if it would be at all possible to do so, do you feel like you could say briefly maybe what you think an ethical person is?
I can try. um, I think someone who's ethical is someone who. Wait, let me restructure my answer. Okay. I think being ethical and being moral are two different things. And I know I just used them in like the same context, so let's just ignore it. I think someone who's moral is at least they are trying to be a good person, right? They are at least they're putting that effort in to at least try to make great decisions. They're trying not to hurt other people, whether that's directly, indirectly, even if they don't really know about it. Someone who's ethical is someone who chooses to live by the rules of society. And they just try to do that, whether that's being a good person. And when they try to live by the rules of society, obviously they will try their best to be a great person as well. So they're very similar, but my big difference is that being ethical is someone who is more of like they're at least trying to be more of a good person. Yeah, you were right. That question is very hard to answer.
Yeah, I mean, I apologize.
Yeah.
I don't mean to put you on the
No,
spot.
you're
I
fine.
agree.
You're fine.
I mean, I think
You're
that
fine.
I would have an equally difficult time answering that question. And it's maybe disconcerting that on the one hand, it seems like that's the most important question if you take the view that education should be in some way moral, right? If education should be in some way moral, then education needs to be guided by some clear conception of what a good person is. And I'm not sure that, and that's not at all easy. And I think that's why maybe in practice a lot of education tends to be purely technical because it'll providing a purely technical education allows you to try to kind of avoid that very difficult question. But I certainly don't think that the fact that it's a difficult question means that it's one that we should dispense with, maybe another way to think about it would be that even if we don't have a unitary idea of what a good person is, perhaps education should involve reflecting on reflecting on what that might mean, even if we never come to a final answer. But I suppose that's neither here nor there. But I think that, yeah, I think that's crucially important, especially now, given all the sort of, this is probably the most simple, obvious one, but the problems that our sort of technological way of life poses to the environment, for example, clearly some element of responsibility is necessary to moderate or moderate technological progress. But in any case, it's a difficult question to answer. So yeah, maybe I'll just leave it there. I don't think that either of us are going to decide now what a good person is, but
Yeah.
it's certainly important to ask. So just going way back to in a different direction. Have you finished your paper? And if so, are you publishing it or taking it to any conferences?
So I have finished my paper. I'm currently in the process of publishing. I'm going to start working with CCIR to actually try to get that published. I think one of the biggest things I want to work on is trying to just make a few more like grammatical edits and make sure it actually the points to make are just going across crystal clear, and just making sure I also have enough data for my paper because, like I said before, it is secondary research. So those are the few things. I'm going to start working with them, like I said before, very soon. I've been relatively very busy with school, but I'm definitely going to start doing that. And I think hopefully it'll turn out great.
That sounds good. Publishing is a difficult process, so it's good that you have sort of a support structure in place for that. And I remember someone at the program I'm in, a professor at the program I'm in, once told me that the best dissertation is a finished dissertation. And I think that applies to any piece of writing. Like the fact that it's finished is the most important thing. Yeah. So, do you have any sort of last thoughts, maybe on how your mentor kind of supported you through the process, or how they were able to be a resource for you?
Yeah. I think so my mentor was probably one of my best friends during this time. She helped me so much throughout the process. Like I said before, like my biggest personal takeaway from this is that it's okay to make mistakes. I'm usually in an environment where, especially whether it's school or like my activities, where I've never really had to get feedback on my writing. That kind of changed a little starting the program, but I think it helped me a lot because my writing was able to get like exponentially better because of my mentor, Dr. Hande. And I think that was probably one of the best benefits I could have had from the program, including the research opportunity and just the level of curiosity about my topic that has increased. I really want to do more research heading off to college, and I really just want to learn more about my topic as a whole.
Yeah, I think that's a great outcome. Like if you feel empowered to continue and excited to continue doing research, I think that's ideal. And I think also what you say about writing is really true. For example, I teach undergraduate classes, and I have to grade, say, 40 papers in 2 weeks, and just because of the time constraints, I can't give the level of detailed feedback that I think I'd actually need to give if I wanted to really help people improve their writing. So being able to work with someone one-on-one on your writing, I think is something that's not easily available, I think, in most educational environments now, which is a shame, but it's a practical concern. It takes a lot of time and individual attention to work on something like writing. And it's important to find a place where you can get that kind of feedback and have that kind of working relationship with someone. So one last question. If you were to if you could give any advice to yourself, 14 weeks ago when you started the program, or to someone like you who is going to do a program like this, what would it be?
Okay. It is a lot of work. However, the work is worth it. in my opinion. I've definitely heard, I did know about the CCIR Instagram, a lot of the question like the answers I found, especially the other spotlight people, is they have also told me that like it's a lot of work. I didn't really understand the amount of work it really was until I got into the program. You do need to devote a lot of time to it. However, I think it was very beneficial. Because of the program, my writing skills have gotten better. I've learned so much more about my topic. I'm so much more empowered and more enthusiastic about it. And I think, like you said before, that is probably one of the most important things, because not only would that help me better publish the paper, but also it's going to help me throughout my life, which I think is definitely that longevity is one of the most important things, and not losing your passion.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think that, yeah, I think especially with research, like you can't do research that you're not in some way passionate about.
Yeah.
Or I've known people who do, and they seem pretty unhappy to me. You know,
Yeah.
I think that if you're going to really immerse yourself in a topic, you have to find some kind of passion for it. Well, in any case, that's all I have today. I really enjoyed talking to you about your work and about your thoughts on education, and I really wish you the best going forward.
Well, it's been nice talking to you.